Snow was falling in slow, shimmering flakes the night Jacob Whitmore's life changed forever. He had stepped out of his car, cold breath fogging the air, another exhausting day behind him, another empty evening ahead. The gates of his mansion had barely begun to close when he noticed a tiny figure standing in the snow, shivering, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit, her boots soaked through. She looked impossibly small against the towering iron fence and the sprawling estate behind him. And then she whispered the words that tore through his carefully built walls, "Please, don't let my mom die." Backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more heart-touching stories to the world. Jacob froze, not because of the cold, but because something inside him cracked wide open. He had built his entire life around strength, logic, and control. Yet those trembling words from a child's lips were enough to make the world tilt beneath him. He lowered himself slowly, meeting her crystal blue eyes that were filled with fear no child should ever carry. Her name, she told him in a voice barely above a breath, was Emily, and her mom had collapsed a few blocks away, inside a small rental home hidden behind towering pines. She didn't know what to do, only that she had seen Jacob's house last Christmas when lights glowed from every window. She thought, maybe someone kind lived there. In that moment, Jacob realized how desperately he wanted to be the kind of person Emily hoped he was. He scooped her into his arms, shielding her from the biting wind as she led him toward the narrow, snow-covered street at the end of the hill. Each crunch of snow beneath his boots felt heavier than the last, knowing time was slipping away. For years he had lived untouched by the world's emotional storms, focused on boardrooms, profit margins, strategies, and numbers that never hugged him back. He had forgotten what it meant to matter to someone. But now, as Emily clung to his coat and guided him with trembling hands, Jacob felt something warm stir inside him, an unfamiliar sense of purpose. When they reached the small house, the door was ajar, snow piling inside. Jacob rushed in, his heart hammering. On the cold wooden floor lay a woman in her early 30s, unconscious, her face pale, breaths shallow and uneven. Her name, Emily said, was Sarah. The room was dimly lit with a single lamp that flickered weakly, and the air carried the quiet desperation of a family hanging by a thread. There were medical bills scattered on the table, an unpaid heating notice taped near the door, and a pair of small mittens resting beside a half-finished drawing Emily must have made earlier. Jacob didn't hesitate. He wrapped Sarah in his coat and carried her out to his car. Emily climbed in beside her mother, holding her cold hand, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Jacob drove faster than he ever had in his life, snow whipping across the windshield, the road barely visible. For once, he didn't care about consequences or danger. All he could think about was the fragile little girl who had trusted him with her whole world. When they reached the hospital, he called in every connection he had built over the years, world-class specialists, emergency teams, and private medical personnel. Money had always been a tool he used to build walls of luxury and distance. Tonight, for the first time, he used it to save a life. Hours passed. Emily fell asleep in the waiting room, curled up in his coat. Jacob sat beside her, feeling strangely protective, watching her small chest rise and fall with every peaceful breath. His thoughts drifted to the life he lived, an empty penthouse, silent dinners, a bed too large for a man with no one waiting for him. For years, loneliness had been a quiet companion he refused to acknowledge. But looking at Emily, he realized he had never felt the weight of his own emptiness as sharply as he did now. Eventually, a doctor approached with a tired smile. Sarah had survived. It would take time for her to recover. Exhaustion, dehydration, and untreated pneumonia had nearly taken her life, but she was stable. Emily woke up just in time to hear the news and threw her tiny arms around Jacob, sobbing into his chest. For the first time in years, Jacob felt tears burn in his own eyes. Over the next few days, Jacob visited Sarah and Emily regularly. Sarah, still weak, would apologize repeatedly for wasting his time, but Jacob would shake his head gently each time. He learned their story piece by piece. Sarah worked 2 jobs, juggling bills, caring for Emily alone after her husband abandoned them when Emily was just a baby. Everything had fallen apart when Sarah got sick, no family nearby, no savings, no one to lean on. She had kept going until her body finally gave out. Jacob listened quietly, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. He had spent years believing kindness was weakness, vulnerability was a liability, and love was nothing more than an unpredictable risk. But here was a woman who had fought battles he never knew existed, alone, unnoticed, unappreciated, and still managed to give her daughter love so fierce it glowed like a flame through the darkest night. When Sarah was finally discharged, Jacob insisted they stay in his guest house until she fully recovered. At first, she refused, embarrassed by their situation, but Emily tugged at her hand, whispering that she felt safe there. Sarah eventually agreed, though her gratitude weighed heavily on her. In the days that followed, Christmas lights sparkled across Jacob's estate. Emily ran across the snowy grounds with her stuffed rabbit bouncing behind her, laughing as she decorated cookies with the house staff. Sarah slowly regained her strength, warmth returning to her cheeks as she found herself surrounded by people who genuinely cared. Jacob tried to be helpful but found himself awkward, unused to family dynamics. Yet Emily treated him like he had always belonged in their world, pulling him into snowball fights, begging him to help build lopsided snowmen, and proudly showing him her drawings. Something inside Jacob softened each time she smiled up at him. One quiet evening, Sarah found Jacob standing alone near the giant Christmas tree in the main hall. Golden lights flickered across his face, revealing a rare vulnerability. She thanked him again, voice trembling, confessing she didn't know why he had chosen to help them when he owed them nothing. Jacob stared at the lights, his expression deep and thoughtful, before admitting in a quiet voice that he envied the love she and Emily shared. He said he had everything money could buy, but nothing that made life meaningful. And when Emily came to him that night in the snow, it felt like a door he didn't know he needed had opened for him. Sarah's eyes softened. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, telling him that sometimes the universe sends us the people we need exactly when our hearts are ready. Jacob didn't say anything, but her words stayed with him. Winter faded into spring. Emily's laughter filled the estate, her drawings taped to Jacob's office walls. Sarah began working part-time at a community center nearby. Jacob had offered her a job at his corporation, but she politely declined, wanting to earn her own place in the world. They settled into a natural rhythm, one that felt strange at first but slowly transformed into something warm, steady, and real. Jacob found himself coming home earlier, eager to join Emily for dinner or help her with her coloring books. On weekends, they visited parks, libraries, and small cafes Sarah loved. People began to talk, whispers about the lonely CEO who suddenly smiled more and worked less. For the first time, Jacob didn't care. He felt alive in a way he never had. But life rarely moves forward without testing what we cherish. One morning, Sarah received a letter from Emily's biological father, who had heard about Sarah's hospitalization and was suddenly demanding visitation rights. The letter threatened legal battles, disruption, and fear. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the paper, old memories reopening wounds she had fought hard to overcome. Emily clung to Jacob's leg, confused and frightened. Jacob knew that moment could break everything they had built together. He wasn't Emily's father. He had no legal claim to protect her. But the thought of losing her, losing both of them, struck him with blinding clarity. He made a decision. Jacob hired the best legal team in the state, ensuring that Emily's safety and emotional well-being were prioritized. He gathered evidence, testimonies, and statements from neighbors and doctors who knew the hardships Sarah had endured alone. He stood beside Sarah every step of the way, shielding her from fear. And when the judge finally ruled that the biological father's sudden interest was not in Emily's best interest, granting Sarah full custody and denying all visitation requests, Sarah collapsed into tears of relief, Jacob holding her tightly as Emily bared